Hi, folks. This is Mark Devine with the Unbeatable Mind podcast. Welcome back. Thanks so much for joining me today. Super appreciate your time and attention. As you know, I don't take it for granted. If you like this podcast, please refer it to your friends and peers if you think it'd be valuable for them. And also, it's helpful if you rate it wherever you listen, especially on iTunes. And if you're interested in some of the training that I talk about tangentially through Unbeatable Mind, check out our new 30-day short course. And you can find that at unbeatablemindcom/challenge. unbeatablemindcom/challenge. My guest today is Prime Hall. By the way, I love that name. Prime's a human performance enthusiast and expert. He is a former Marine Raider, right? So I have a deep connection with the Marine Raiders that would be fun to talk about. And he also was a water combat or water survival instructor for the Marines. He's trained thousands of Marines in water confidence, which is he's parlayed into a new career using water in his fitness business called Deep End Fitness, as well as a new sport called the Underwater Torpedo League. And I think that is wicked cool because we used to play underwater hockey in the SEALs, and they're connected, right? They have a common heritage. Prime, thanks for coming up. You're here in person at our Carlsbad office studio.
Yes, 100%. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you here. I love brothers when we come up and we can talk shop and share horror stories,
100%.
Share healing stories, because there's a lot of vets who listen to this podcast, and there are a lot of people who care about vets who've gone through struggles and healing, and I think it's cool that you kind of found your way through that, and now you help others through your training, but also through your inspirational work. So, hoo-yah out of that.
Yes, sir.
Prime, I always like to start out. First off, how'd you get that name, Prime? Like, that's super cool. Like,
yeah.
What were your parents thinking?
Yeah, everybody always asks me that, and they say, "Is it like Amazon? Is it like Optimus Prime?"
Optimus is what I was thinking. It's better than Amazon.
Now they say yeah.
Well, let's go with Optimus.
Right. But I randomly had an Uncle Prime on my dad's side of the family.
Okay.
And
that was his first name?
That was his first name, yeah. And so and also I had a Prime on my mom's side as well. And one of them was spelled with an I, one of them was spelled with a Y. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up getting the I, Prime. And so, yeah.
Well, it primed you for the life that you had, for sure.
Exactly, 100%.
Tell me about the influences that led you into the Marine Corps. It's always an interesting story to me. Like, how did you end up in the Marines, and why the Marines?
Yeah, so I started out in South Texas and grew up in Corpus Christi. And as I was, I had my mom, my dad, my sister, and I ran into some challenges that built a lot of resiliency for me early on. And when I the first one was really, I fractured my skull when I was 7.
Ouch. And
so I fell off my roof. It was just a freak thing where my mom walked outside and I was like doing my thing on the roof, and she was like, "Stop!
Right, too late.
Don't fall!" And then I was like, and then I fell.
Oh my God, she literally scared you. And
she
manifested the fall. Oh,
right. Shoot. So I landed on my head and blacked out. Got rushed to the ER. I didn't have any internal bleeding, thankfully, but my whole head was mush.
Oh God!
Like it wasn't a hard structure anymore. And
really?
So I had a year of recovery where I had to sit out from PE and
pretty much everything. You had to let the skull heal and
all the
concussion effect.
And so that kind of had a lasting impact on me. I still remember sitting out and feeling like different. And then I remember I couldn't go underwater. That was one of the things, like you can't do anything. And so now it's kind of. That's still, like, I still want to be underwater because I couldn't be underwater.
Interesting.
When I was 7.
This is fascinating how such a formative experience can, like, literally chart the trajectory of your life somehow.
And how that synchronicity,
right.
plays in. And it's like, wow, that's so,
That's
but then, so that, and then probably, right after recovering from that, we moved into a new neighborhood. And when we moved into that, I had a peeping Tom, like a stalker peeping Tom guy that was, creeping me out and in my window and doing these different things. And that was right when caller ID had came out.
Mm-hmm.
So I was dealing with that at night.
How old were you then?
8, 9.
Oh man, that's terrifying.
Yeah, and so I was telling my parents, or trying, and they weren't believing me because they hadn't caught him yet. And this went on for a few years, and then they finally ended up catching him.
Good God.
And then
I don't think I've ever heard of that before. I mean, I've heard of it happening, but I've never met anyone that.
It made me, so I lived in my closet. I was very independent. I went through a lot dealing with this guy that was always
really
there.
Traumatic.
Yeah, and I created survival mechanisms for myself back then that I could work through it.
Mm-hmm.
But it also kind of, it was challenging for me because it created a huge gap with my parents.
Yeah.
So anyway, my parents caught him, and then they ended up getting divorced soon after. And then my mom moved away, and I moved in with my dad into a new apartment or condo, and then he moved out. So I ended up living by myself at a young age.
Good Lord,
for a couple years.
Holy cow.
And then, but my grandparents were always phenomenal too. So I had these grandparents that were like my parents throughout my whole life, and they took me on trips every summer when I was growing up, and they always mentored me.
Well,
and
let's go back. How old were you when you were living by yourself?
13, 14 years old.
Well, how were you making ends? Where were you getting food and stuff?
So, very street savvy and creative with how I did it. So I would eat at school,
Mm-hmm.
for lunch or
So
whatever.
you found your way
day
to school every day.
Yep.
Out of
Found
necessity
my way.
and patterns.
Yep.
I guess.
Got my way to school. I got a hardship license when I was 15, right when I turned 15. So I had a car when I was 14.
Wow.
And so
That's Texas for you.
Yeah, and not a nice one, but I had transportation because I had to get around. I had to take care of myself. So
what happens? You just walk into the DMV and say, "I don't have any parents. I need a car," or
no,
social services, or what happens?
There was a kind of a loophole where if you do your driver's ed in advance and you qualify for hardship license, like me, I qualified because I didn't have a lot of, my parents were gone or this or this or this, so I needed to be able to take myself to school. And so I qualified, and then I had all my paperwork met, and they gave me the license.
There was no attempt to get you into a foster home or anything like that?
Yes, so that's how I got into the Marine Corps, is that my grandparents came one of those summers to take me on a summer vacation, and they came to my apartment and they saw that I was living by myself, and they were like, this is not acceptable.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so they offered to send me to military boarding school at a Marine Military Academy in Harlingen, Texas. And so I went on a tour, and it's I think at the time even it was $20,000 a year for them to send me there. So I went from no security, limited security, and kind of no rules, and in a scary situation for me at that time, to being with rules in boarding school, in military school.
Total security. Yeah.
Total security, locked down. It's maximum security.
Yeah.
And then with a drill instructor that had 2 tours from Vietnam, that's a Marine, just badass,
Wow.
That's always on me, if anything, and I loved it. So that was
a fascinating contrast.
Yeah, so I ended up, I was a lot of kids at military school, they get sent there against their will.
And you went right.
I went.
Thank God. Yeah.
Yes, I was
savior.
Please. So that was one of the highlights of my childhood for sure. So.
Right.
After that, I got to, and going there, I learned a lot of the ins and outs of the Marine Corps, and had a lot of kind of seeds planted of watching, in class, watching Marines go through the O course on TV, every day, they always had it playing in certain classes or stuff like that. And so I was always
and most of the kids go into the Marine Corps from there, or?
A good amount of them do. And I saw a few of them that were in, that was kind of mind blowing for me, because I'm okay, we were in ROTC, boarding school, but now we're in real Marine Corps, and it's just I'm trying to separate the two, but But anyway, so long story short, I did that. After high school, I went to down to with my grandparents to live, and I had been working construction. And I've been working construction with my grandparents in the summer too, since I was like 13, down on the Mexican border. And you know, I was the only white kid on the construction site with 50 to 100 hard ass construction workers. Some of them are illegals and everything else, and they know that my grandfather was the one that was the guy that ran the site. So when he's gone and I'm there, they want to give me a hard time. So I got to like, you know, build a lot of resiliency working in those situations as well. But I went from doing that since I was 13. Now I was like 19 and I'm working construction doing this, and I started to go on a self-destructive path. And I didn't have purpose. And so I had all this like feeling like I had to do something big, but I had nothing to put that energy towards. And so I started getting in trouble, and started going to jail and doing this and this and this. And at a certain point, my grandfather was like, "Hey, you remember how good you did at military school?" And he's like, "You're off track. Like, what if you got to do something like that again, and you know, you'd be amazing at it. What if we went and talked to the Marine recruiters, you know?" And so we went down, and then
your grandfather saved you again.
He saved me. Yeah.
That's
so
cool.
I got out of it. You know, I got out of I cleared up all my court cases, and I went into the Marine Corps in 2005.
That's amazing. So you enlisted in the Marine Corps, went through boot camp and all that, and you ended up where? In infantry, or what was your first thing?
Yes. So I ended up, I was actually supposed to be artillery up front, because that's what my recruiters had kind of talked me into doing. You know, that was like, you're going to be the king of the battlefield and this and this and this. And when I got in, I was like, wait, so all these guys are infantry? I want to be with those guys.
Right.
They look like the warriors, you know, or whatever. So I got my MOS changed from artillery to infantry, and then I went through infantry school. And after that, I got stationed here at Camp Pendleton at 2-1, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, and as an infantryman. And my first day in my new unit, they offered me a deal to go to sniper tryout.
Nice.
To the NDOC. And I didn't even know. I just got there. I don't even know where the PX is or where the, you know, I don't know anything. So I'm like, me? You know, and they're like, yeah, you meet everything on paper, so we're going to send you. And they didn't have enough volunteers from everyone that's in the unit, so they're like getting the new guys that qualified to go. So I'm like, okay. So I went, and, you know, I magooed myself through this NDOC. I felt like, you know, I figured it out on the fly and kind of like,
magooed yourself.
You know, slimed my way through. And then, but I learned a lot, you know, and then about perseverance and going way past my limitation, or what I thought I could do. And then, you know, I ended up having some disciplinary problems, and with between myself. I wasn't in a good place at that point. I was having some stuff going on back home. My stepmom got killed in a car accident. I was supposed to have a Red Cross, supposed to be going back for the funeral. Had like a big thing where they were sending me to go back. I ended up going back, and it was like they ended up hazing me and doing some different stuff instead of sending me to my funeral. And so that like kind of set me on. So
that triggered the rebellious.
It triggered that. Yeah,
of yourself,
and I like something flipped, but everything happens for a reason. So I ended up getting removed from sniper platoon, getting put back into the infantry, and to me that was like a failure. But I learned like that literally just motivated me so much to like perform at a completely different level than I ever had before. So I went back to the infantry. I was still a little heavy, and like, you know, I wasn't even hitting my potential even close to what I could do. So and I was still drinking, and that was a huge like setback for me. So on my first deployment, it was a training deployment, year-long 31st MEU, and we went to Japan and Australia.
I did one of those.
All these different
I
Philippines,
actually floated with
Korea.
the MEU. We call it Amphibious Readiness Group, right?
Right.
Yeah, you guys did the MEU, and the ARGs kind of, I think they kind of like trailed or intersected the MEUs in their deployments. But
yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, so
island hopping and whatnot.
Yeah, so I got into the Marine Corps, and then I got on another destructive path. And so I got in trouble. I was a private 3 times,
Holy cow.
Lost all rank. I was on admin separation board to get kicked out on my first deployment.
Wow.
And like, that's when that's when I stopped drinking. And when I stopped, everything changed.
Interesting.
My training I just started like, because I'm a private, I have
So what was going through your mind? Obviously, you didn't want to get kicked out, but somehow you identified the drinking as being a root cause of or exacerbating your behavioral problems.
Yes. Yeah, I was having.
Did you have any counseling or mentor at the time, or were you just figuring this out on your own?
I did. I actually had my staff sergeant at the time, who was our platoon sergeant. He took me, instead of, I had an alcohol-related incident in Japan that was kind of like the needle that broke the haystack, and they were like, that's it, because this is like a pattern of like, me kind of blacking out and then going like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of thing, right? And so and a lot plays into it. There's an acronym that I share with people that's HALT. So don't drink if you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
Yes.
But like, you mix those things with also being in Okinawa, where it's like 120 degrees, or these different things, and it's like, now these are recipes for disaster.
That's right.
Don't do these. Stay away from these things. But so I was having blackouts, and then I would wake up the next day, and they'd be like, "Hey, you did this," and I'm like, "That wasn't. I don't even feel like I don't even remember any of that." So that was like a clear thing. Like this isn't working.
Not for you.
This isn't working for me at all. Right. So, but once I got away from it, then I separated myself from the pack that I was hanging out with that was also destructive. I started being like accountable and like focused, and I started training, and that's right when MARSOC was starting. So I'm still on deployment. I'm hearing there's like little, hey, there's going to be a class in the auditorium today they're going to be talking about MARSOC, it's a new thing, blah, blah, blah. And that's like just...
And for those who don't know, MARSOC is Marine Special Operations Command. And the intersection for me here is I went over in 2004 with SEAL Team 1 with the SOCOM debt attached. Marine Corps SOCOM debt, which was the proof of concept.
Yep.
So they pulled like 100 of the best recon Marines and intel guys and communicators and medics, and they put them on this team and said, okay, you go prove that Marines can operate as special operators. And I could go on and on about that. It was fascinating, really, really rewarding. So I wrote the report or led the writing of the report for the Navy on whether the Marines should even join special operations.
Right.
And of course I advised that they should, but they should bring a MAGTAF. And the Marines shot that idea down because they didn't want to give up their aircraft. A MAGTAF is a Marine Air Ground Task Force, which would have been really valuable for SOCOM because all the aircraft come from the Air Force, or you have to get it from your native service.
Yep.
Anyways, so there you are. You're interested in the Raiders. What I'm curious about is like, when did you start teaching yourself did you learn how to swim earlier in your life, or did you teach yourself as a Marine?
Yeah, so I was never on a swim team or anything like that, but my grandmother, she was a synchronized swimmer.
Oh, no kidding.
In college.
That's interesting.
At like University of Oklahoma or something.
Right.
So even when I was like 2 years old, she would always take me to the swimming pool, and have me in like, these little bathing suit competitions or whatever, since I was little. But I always loved the pool. Right. And I always had neighborhood pools that I went to religiously every day during the summer, and I just that was like my that's my spot. So I'm a water enthusiast. Now I understand that, but I've always been drawn to the water. I grew up in Texas, on Corpus Christi, which has North Padre Island. So you cross a bridge and you're on an island. And then my other home base is South Padre Island. So that's 2 hours south. And it's, again, another island. Go over a bridge. And it's a different, you're obviously in the ocean, you're on the water, but, it's kind of like a, different kind of Texas than what you would expect. But
yeah, I don't usually think of Texas as the Gulf of Mexico, or if I do, I think of oil. Yeah, so it's more like Florida, probably.
Yeah,
like
a little bit. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Right, except the water isn't as blue.
It's not as blue because of the oil.
Right,
industry.
It's a little dark.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So how did you get into where you were working at the pool, teaching, or doing the water survival stuff?
Right. So I knew that from talking to people that were in recon or force recon or going into MARSOC or training for MARSOC, that the water portions were a huge point of friction,
failure, a lot of
failure
people,
for people. So they're like, you got to get good in the water. Most people wash out in the water. So and how one of the schools that I had available, because in the infantry and the Marines, it's hard to get schools, to be honest with you. So at that point,
except for sniper school, apparently.
Right. The only school that I had available to me at that point was, and my swim qualification was at the highest that it could be at that point. So if you're high and they have slots at the school and they need people at the pool to work, if they need instructors and all those things are lining up, then you can make a case and say, hey, I'm this guy. I have, a year left on my contract and I'm ready to go to the water survival course, And so it worked out. I had a friend that was working at the pool, so I got in. I did all of the water survival courses that they offered at the pool, which was their own kind of hodgepodge backyard wrestling water survival course. And then I did a combat water safety swimmer course, which was the precursor. Then I went to the water survival course, which was 3 weeks. And for me, I'm negatively buoyant, so I sink fast. And that was hard. That was a very big challenge for me to do the water survival course. I found out because we're doing a lot of rescues, and it's full gear rescues. So you're wearing a plate carrier, without plates, a helmet, even rifle, boots, everything. And you're taking each other down and doing the whole, rescue underwater over and over and over and over and over on top of everything else. But that seemed to be the hardest challenge. But long story short, water survival school built a lot of the technical pieces of swimming and coaching and training water confidence. But it's just a 3-week course. So to really integrate and solidify everything that I learned there, it didn't really happen until I got back to the pool that I worked at, and I started leading trainings and briefing every day, multiple times, and then starting to figure out what works and what doesn't work. With unlocking results for these Marines, because some of them that come in to get their annual swim qualification or whatever it is, or jump off the 30-foot high tower, some of them have horrible water confidence, and some of them are very scared of heights. So what can I do, and how can I show up, and what are the things that I can say that's going to get them across the pool with whatever they need to get done, and what can I do that's going to get them safely off that tower without them coming down with negative paperwork, or me having to sometimes I give them a little nudge to get them off, but so though it's thousands of reps I started to get, and then there's all kinds of random trainings that are going on there. There's 100 Marines that come for a swim qual here, and then an hour later there's 20 recon guys that are doing this training, and then there's this and this and this and this. So as a young Marine, I was responsible, and the instructors that were with me, and my partner Don Tran was with me as well from this at that time. And we were young Marines, and we were responsible for that and all the training. So we became well versed in risk management
Yeah.
and operational risk management, which we use all of that,
Yeah.
every day.
But before you got out and started the water work that you're doing now, you went into the Marine Raiders. Actually, you got into MARSOC.
Yes.
So, what was that experience like? Good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
I've actually never interviewed a MARSOC Marine. I've interviewed a ton of
Wow.
SEALs, obviously, and a few Special Forces guys. But,
Yeah. Well.
first one.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, and thanks for doing it. It was like felt like a startup.
Yeah.
You know.
It was pretty early days. 2008. What year were you in?
So coming in 2009, and
Right.
then at ITC.
Yeah, MARSOC
selection.
didn't form until 7, I think.
Right.
Yeah, because the SOCOM debt happened in 2004. Took them 2 years to kind of figure things out, and then
Yeah.
2009. So you were really early.
Yeah. So I'm coming in I felt like the second wave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like there's already
Yeah.
there's already a foothold
Right.
and like momentum, and so we come in, but there's still not a lot of like systems and organization or
Mhm.
these specific things that take time
Mm-hmm.
to develop, and so it was doing more with less. You know, I hated that a lot when I was in
Mhm.
the military, but I'm so appreciative of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it breeds innovation,
Mm-hmm.
and if you have everything, you're not going to
You
be
can get complacent.
right.
Yeah.
And so, we would always get like upset whenever we go to Guam or something, and we see like, we have these little lockers like this, but the SEALs have a huge,
Yeah.
it's
I
like,
know.
that's not fair. It's like, hey, dude, we're like 4 years old.
When I was in the teams, it was like that.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
we were a little bit more further along in terms of our timeline, but man, we did not have all the Gucci gear that they have nowadays.
Right.
And we had to make do and use rigorous tape and bubble gum, to
Yep.
fix things.
Yeah.
And then it started to really flow, especially around 9/11. After that, the money just spigots opened up for SOCOM.
Yeah. So, getting in, getting into selection was like such a different experience from everything that I had experienced in the Marine Corps
Mm-hmm.
so far. And you're kind of on your own
Mm-hmm.
for, roughly 30 days.
Mhm.
And it's zero talk, all action.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yes, I loved it. And I'm a little bit introverted, so I can go by myself and that's
Figure
actually
stuff out.
yeah. And I like that,
Mhm.
being a lone operator sometimes. I like being in a team as well, but
Mm-hmm.
I like doing that. So I love selection. It was ran so professionally and just, it was a good starting point. And then I thought that, that was like the kicker. And then I got to ITC, and that's the individual training course, which is, modeled.
It's like their buds.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was like, we got there and, we had like 100 people. Everybody passed selection. So we're like, oh, yeah, maybe there will be a couple of people that drop out of this. But for the most part, we're all going to make it through, And it's like, nah, no. We graduated with like 12 of the original people that started,
Nice.
And it was like, that was still when they were figuring out the schoolhouse.
Mhm.
So they made a huge changes after that class because there wasn't a lot of ROI, return on investment, for their work.
Yeah, that's a
But
little bit high attrition, but it's about what the SEALs to this day have.
I know.
And no matter what they do, they can't fix the attrition. They've been able to nudge it up by about 5%.
Yeah.
In my class, we had 185, 19 graduated. And it's pretty typical. He ended up with some great operators, but you have to, that there's some great operators who just,
Right.
some stupid thing happened, right? Some
Yep.
instructor marked him down because he was having a bad day. The instructor was having a bad day. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So a lot of good people get passed by, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
Yeah.
That's cool. So what was operating in the SOCOM like, or in the MARSOC like? And where did you operate? And let's talk about that experience in Afghanistan.
Yeah. So, getting in, I was a new guy just coming out of individual training course and selection. We were the first ones to go through ITC.
Mm-hmm.
So when we got to our unit, I got stationed at 1st Raider Battalion. A lot of the older guys that were legit, that had the combat experience, that were the leaders, zero of them
They hadn't been
had
through
been.
ITC.
And
A lot
none of
those
them
guys
really knew.
they seeded them from the SOCOM debt,
Yes.
and then they went directly in there from recon.
Right.
without an ITC program. Huh? Interesting.
Yeah, and legends, amazing, and really, like, I can't say enough about the recon community and the force recon community, and how, you know, MARSOC was built off the backs of those guys that succeeded in the pilot program, and what it set up for us. But then even going back to the World War II Marine Raiders and the lineage with that, those guys are just absolutely phenoms, and the culture that they set is like second to none. So what it was like operating was coming into that as, like, you know, high sense of urgency to perform. And so that unlocked a lot of flow states, you know, in the shooting package or in this, because, you know, all these guys that have done 50 shooting packages or whatever, there's, you know, they've got every story and they've done all this stuff. And it's like, hey, I have to show up and I have to, like, perform.
For the listeners, and this is parlance, a shooting package is just basically a course. But it's, you know, you do the course, you might do the same course, you know, 5 or 6 times in your career.
Right.
And it's just like refresher training.
Yeah.
But that training has a crawl, walk, run kind of battle rhythm to it, right?
Exactly.
So by the time you're done with the quote unquote package, whether it's 3 weeks or 6 weeks, you're running and gunning pretty hard.
Yeah.
But then you go do it over again on your next pump or your next whatever, and so you just keep on refining those skills.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, even like, you know, when you're just starting out with that level of shooting and all that, to have, like, as a new guy, having all your magazines loaded a certain way and be ready for the next drill and all that stuff, and then, like, be managing all your responsibilities in the team and all this stuff, that builds a lot of capacity for you to expand your plate and what's possible for you and what you can accomplish as an individual, and then what you can bring to your team. So it was crucial, and so we had very few new guys in our company and in our team. It was just a couple of us, and so we had an amazing example that was in front of us from across the board from all teams. And we were in Charlie Company and first MSOB at the time. Now it's First Raider Battalion, First Marine Special Operations Battalion, and we were training, prepping to go to Afghanistan. And they had been going to Helmand to Afghanistan for the last couple rotations, so they were very savvy and in their experience that they had had thus far, and how that was different from Iraq.
And what was the mission that you guys had over there?
We were doing Village Stability Operations was what our team did. And so we were working on stability, development, and governance in a certain area of Helmand, Afghanistan, that just also happened to be an enemy village. And so we had very few, you know, it's all about...
Do you have an FOB in the village or outside? Or
It was in the village.
In the village.
Yeah.
So you were camped in an enemy village?
Yes, for 7 months.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Yeah, and we had 2 sites, so most of our team was at the main team site, and then me and a couple other operators were at a logistics hub with the Afghan Special Forces team and an Army infantry squad. And then whatever contractors and other cats and dogs were there, but there was one medic there was like a couple operators and me. And and we were in charge of that site, and then our team that had most of the hitters was at the other side.
Interesting.
And
why did you split your forces like that?
2 positions are better than one, especially there. And then we could have 2 G bosses, cameras that are up, and that kept the enemy like back.
Interesting.
And when towards the end, we ended up folding in one site. And we folded the camera, and then we moved everyone, and this is like the last couple of weeks. And literally that first day that we brought that down, they came in on us like...
No kidding.
So those,
because you had snipers out there, so the camera could pick up the movement, and then you could take... I see. Interesting. Is that where you had your incident?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You started to tell me about that before we started. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so... 9 years ago this week, 2 days from now. Well, that was if you remember, that was the peak of green on blue insider attacks in Afghanistan, was that year, 2012. And
insider attack is when, and these were mostly Afghan who were supported and trained by the U.S., supposed to be working alongside, attacked a U.S. soldier or unit.
Right.
That's horrible.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of things that were happening, obviously there at the time, but then also back here that were creating a lot of friction for us. So there was a priest in Florida that burned a Quran, and then there was a cartoon video that came out about the Prophet Muhammad being all this funny stuff.
I remember that, yeah.
And so those things, there's second and third order effects to those acts that people were doing back here. And literally, like, the guys that were in the village.
Wasn't that the same video that was blamed on the Benghazi attack?
I believe so.
Yeah.
But those things matter.
Yeah, they do.
And they had huge repercussions for us. And we felt them like that. Even like villages that we would drive through before that were friendly, now we're driving through and it's like a whole different environment.
No kidding.
And so, I just say that because that still sticks out to me, that, the actions of the individuals here in the U.S. were creating so much trouble for us over there. I don't think they even realize it.
Right.
So, but
you can guarantee they didn't realize it.
Right. Of course.
Yeah.
So all that, and that's kind of setting the stage. So we had been in country for maybe 5 months at this time. So got in and had some teammates that were wounded that had already been sent back. We had tons of Afghans that had been wounded and all these different, just tons of medevacs, and everything was just like nonstop. And then we had an Afghan Special Forces team with us that whole time, and they had just transitioned out to get a new team in. And so we had challenges with them when we first started, but they ended up being in some really challenging missions with us that we had to, and so we worked it out with them, and we really we became a team. The next crew that just came in, the first crew looked like it, and they acted sometimes like kind of cartoonish, where they're like, we don't want to go on mission, and they're in their underwear, These next guys that came, they're like force recon, like boom, long beards, all gear is ready to go, like just locked in. And they're like, hey, I'm responsible for training for the Afghan Special Forces and the local police. That was my job.
Right.
And so I'm like, hey, can you guys help support me with training? We work with you to train the Afghan local police. We can run it. Like, they just took it over, blah, 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 blah. And then so I'm like, wow, these guys are next level, like all this stuff. With those guys, we don't vet them. We get them handed to us, right? So they're already vetted from higher and from
by Afghan or U.S.
By U.S.
Interesting.
Yeah. So they've made it through all the different ranks of the Afghan military, from like being in the army to being in the Rangers, to being in this, to going to the special operations training, to now they're SF. And so they've had so many vetting. So when they get to us, we monitor them, but we're not vetting them to see if they're good or bad. They should be good because
you'd hope
our
so.
command is giving them. So, like 5 days in to this, it's it's during the hottest time of the year. It's also a time where the team was the Afghans are fasting, and they're doing Ramadan work. And so, there's situations that are like, when it's 130 or 120 degrees and you're fasting, but, there's only there's a small amount of us that live here. So if a truck comes, that's the monthly shipment of water, we need everybody to help get it off, And so there were things like that where it was like, hey, we need everyone. And then they were fasting and they got upset or whatever, and this and this and this. But long story short, I was in an insider attack. And it was 9 years ago on the 13th, so 3 days from now, on August 13th, 2012, I got woken up and at like 7 a.m. by someone that was on security and told me that I had an Afghan outside at the gate that wanted to talk with me. So I grabbed my interpreter, we went out, and just something real silly or whatever. So, I dealt with it, and then the villager left. I came in, I sat down at a picnic table and started eating cereal. And I have like, I'm sitting there, I'm in board shorts. I have a Glock on my board shorts. I have like a tank top on.
No body armor.
No body armor,
gear.
nothing. And my glasses, my sunglasses were on top of my head.
Right.
So they weren't covering my eyes. And I had a four-wheeler right next to me, next to my picnic table. And so I was eating, and then all of a sudden it just went shoo, boom. And I was on the ground, and I was like delirious a little bit. And I was like, and I thought that the four-wheeler had exploded out of nowhere, you know? And then all of a sudden another explosion.
Are these mortars or rockets?
RPGs.
RPGs. Oh, shit.
Yeah, so this Afghan Special Forces guy that's in the tower that's like 25 feet right here, he's in there, and he's
aiming at you.
He's aiming at me.
Dang.
And he made up his mind that morning that this is it. This is his last stand.
Right.
So there was an altercation the night before that we didn't know about inside of within their team that
and
translated.
He decided his loyalties were with whoever,
right.
Taliban or
and then
Al-Qaeda
he's decided
against
like,
America.
screw them.
I see.
Yeah, so he was against his own team and us.
Interesting.
And so the way that it played out was like, you know, I ended up getting knocked unconscious. He was just reattacking and shooting, like reloading and shooting. So there was over 12 RPGs that he ended up getting off. But not all of them were at me in that kill zone. He ended up
I was going to say he's not a very good shot because obviously.
But at least 4 of them were in the kill zone with me in there, you know. Jeez. And so I ended up being able to, like, I remember like laying on the ground after being blacked out and like holding my eyes because I could feel my glasses were here, and I held my eyes open like this and I couldn't see, and I was like, I thought I was blinded, and I started kind of like panicking a little bit and having like disparity, you know, and thinking about just like worse things, and then all of a sudden I like focused. It was able to see. And then just to my right, there's the interpreter living space. So I like roll over, I crawl in there, and I get in there, and there's 2 of my interpreters, and they're just holding hands and going, "Big problem, big problem." Oh my God. And I was like,
no shit.
I got to get out of here.
Holy cow.
This is not helping anything. You know,
Right.
I got to get to somewhere where decisions or something can be done, communication. So I crawled out and like ran out and got into the operations center, but the operations center is right underneath where this guy is shooting the RPGs. Like literally I walked right underneath or ran right underneath him in here, and he was probably reloading because as soon as I got in there, he hit the operations center with the first one. Boom. And it's just a little like dugout, you know, just a little, I don't even know, it's just a bunker, you know, with a bunch of sandbags on it and whatever else. And that's where we were communicating to the main team, our team that was at the other side.
Could they hear you? Could they hear it? I'm sure they knew something was going on. Okay.
Yeah, but we thought we were locked in with mortars. We thought we were locked in, that they had mortars locked in, and it was the A team that had locked in, and that they were hitting direct hits. And we were so scared because we were like, dude, we still, like, I was thinking in my head, like, we still have 4 months of deployment or something, you know? If they've got us locked in.
So you didn't know the guy was in the tower?
No.
I see.
And that was honestly my biggest takeaway from the whole thing, and all of the research and case study type work that I've done with other insider attacks, looking into them, is that it was missed by everybody that this was coming from inside of our own security bubble.
Interesting.
And
so you're looking outside the wire for the attackers. Yeah.
And the human mind or the psyche or something, it preconceives that this is safe and that it's not coming from this, or however that works.
It's a failure of imagination, just like we talked about with 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't expect that. These are your peeps. Okay, so how did you guys get out of that situation?
So we were in there with a couple of my teammates, and we're communicating, you know, with the other team, and there's other things going down. There's other Taliban that are, you know, right outside of our perimeter that are getting killed and other stuff during the same thing. So it's kind of confusing to like put it all together. And we have a couple Afghan Special Forces guys that ran out of our compound in the daylight into the village. that's unheard of. We don't even put our hand over the wall because they'll start shooting at you.
Really?
We definitely don't run out. Yeah, if you expose yourself in the daytime at this place, you're done.
Wow.
Like I used to do serial numbers and stuff, and manage the CMR and all of the inventory. And so I'd have to get these serial numbers on top of the vehicle and stuff. And if I did it even with remote light, sometimes I'd get shot, a couple pop shots at me, I had an armory that was on one side of our camp that was kind of elevated to where they could see from certain parts of the green zone.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when I'd go in there and like unlock it, they'd start pop, 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 and
Jeez Louise.
So it was a wild thing, but all of that being said, we all expected for the attacks to come from outside because that was the norm.
Mm-hmm.
So when this one time it came from inside, we couldn't even we couldn't conceive that.
Mm.
And when we finally did, it was one of the Army guys came over the radio and said, hey, one of the interpreters is saying that one of the Afghans is in the tower. He's gone crazy and he needs to get killed. And we're like, oh my gosh. Okay, now we understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Now we know we have isolated the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So now we can work the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, we ended up going out and like clearing our way outside of the operations building around to where they said all the Afghans were on the back of the building, like, doing something. So we went back there to their whole team and they were like, completely distraught trying to give their weapons and and all this other stuff. Long story short, 3 of their guys had gotten killed in this thing because they were trying to go up into the tower to help attack out or whatever they were doing, and this guy was like, don't come up here, I'll kill you. And they're like, no way. And they start going and he kills them. And then the other guy comes up, like their captain climbed up on their living space to try to shoot him, to try to get a vantage point. And as soon as he peeked up, they shot him in the head. Jesus. So now he's down. The first guy that ran up is down. And then a third guy tried to go up the tower to get him. He shot him right when he started running. So now there's 3 guys that are like dead on the ground.
Killed his own guys.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so then we ended up getting him, taking care of him. And then after that was done.
And what was the medical fallout for you? Did you get concussed and did you have any issues from that? Imagine.
Yeah, so loss of consciousness and concussion, and just afterwards I felt very delirious.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, I was still able to do my job in a little bit in that situation afterwards, and question key people and do different things and separate everyone from their weapons and whatever, but I was like goofy.
Mm-hmm.
And many people had gotten concussions, so we got examined by the medic, and some of us got flown out, medevac, but we were back within like 2 days. So yeah, and I also want to just mention and honor 3 fallen raiders that were killed on this day that year as well in an insider attack.
Jeez.
3 former
not with your team.
Not with our team, but they were in another team in our company. So Matt Manukian, Captain Matt Manukian, Ryan Jeske.
I know Ryan. I trained Ryan.
Right.
We trained him at SEAL Fit.
Yep.
What a phenomenal guy.
Yep.
Remember? Well, your brother would remember Ryan.
Ryan Jeske.
I always wondered what happened to Ryan.
And Sky Moat. So
God bless you
Ryan
guys.
he passed in that.
Oh man.
In an insider attack. It was this day. So
wow.
I mentioned them because they've been on my mind all
when
day.
When I trained Ryan, he was
yesterday.
thinking about Delta.
Yep.
But he ended up going MARSOC.
Yeah. He trained.
He was a stud.
Yeah.
What a stud.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. God bless those guys. And all operators, who lost their lives in Afghanistan. Look what's happening now.
Mm-hmm.
Taliban taking it back.
Yeah.
What a waste, in my opinion. But we do what we do as warriors.